All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is our very last Wednesday webinar. We're very glad to have you. Let me get to our opening slide here. So today we're going to be talking about energy efficiency and long-term housing affordability with the panel that you see before you. Again, thanks for being here. We're really glad to have all of you attending, and we're especially glad to have all of these panelists with us today. As always, we were supposed to have this summit way earlier in the year. We're now at the kind of tail end of all the festivities, and I think I can say definitively that we've gotten a lot more engagement than we would normally in person, which is great, having these virtual and having them weekly instead of all crammed together. We do miss talking to all of you, so we look forward to being able to do that again when the time comes. But we're definitely grateful to be doing this virtually the best. Our very last sort of event of the virtual summit is this Friday. It's the big one. It's the half-day plenary. We just sent out a couple emails with all of the details, so I'd encourage you to look for those with all the sort of extra panels and speakers. There's a lot of them. There's a pretty huge amount of content for just a half-day virtual event. But the highlights are Scott Spencer of Smart Growth America and the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and award-winning columnist E.J. Dion of the Washington Post and Brookings Institution. We've got sort of panels, again, just announced that will be responding to those gentlemen's remarks. Should be really great stuff. And we've got our awards program built into the day as well. There's a lot going on, so definitely keep your eye out for those. We're going to be sending out, for those that are registered for our summit, we're going to be sending out a YouTube link. It's going to be just live on YouTube, private. Actually, I think later today. So you should be getting that information very shortly, and you'll be all set to tune in Friday morning with us. And of course, we couldn't be doing any of this stuff without our sponsors. So big thank you to all the fine folks listed here. In addition, a couple other notes. We've got full bios of our panel today and all of our panels previously on our website. If you're interested, you can find it there. And this webinar and our previous webinars are all approved for one AICP credit. So if you're seeking those, you can head to the AICP website and log them there. We welcome all of your questions throughout the entire duration of this webinar. Just use the Q&A function right here in Zoom, and we'll block out some time at the end to get to all of those and answer them and have a in-depth conversation as well. The very last thing is this is being recorded, as were all of our other webinars. So you should be able to watch any of them that you missed. And if you're kind of tuning in late and you're going to miss maybe the first part of this, or you need to leave and you don't want to totally miss the end, you will have access to the recording very shortly as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brenda. She's going to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, CJ, for the intro. And I'm Brenda Clement. I'm Director of Housing Works Rhode Island. And if you're not familiar with Housing Works, we're a research and policy organization located at Roger Williams University that looks at the connectedness between housing and all things, and including economic growth and health outcomes and educational attainment and energy, as we will talk about today. In this session is the energy efficiency and housing affordability, a double bottom line. I also am always pleased to be working with our colleagues at Grow Smart. We have had a strong and long partnership with them for many years, so we're pleased to participate. I do also want to give a special shout out to my colleague, our Director of Research here at Housing Works, Annette Bourne, who I know is listening in, who is very interested in this topic and helped to assemble this great panel before us. I'll say a few words about everybody before they do their presentation, but let me just introduce you quickly to the panel that we have with us. Christian Calderon from NeighborWorks Blackstone River Valley, Rilwan Faye Isatan, I didn't get that right, but I'll try it again, Rilwan, from the CAP here in Providence, Antonio Rodriguez from One Neighborhood Builders, and Peter Asen from Providence Housing Authority. And as I said, I'll say a few more words about each of them. in a few, but first I'll start off with Peter, who's going to start us off with his presentation as well. Peter is currently the Director of Strategy and Development for the Providence Housing Authority. He's been there since January of 2018. And he oversees communication between the PHA's executive office and resident organizations and coordinates strategic planning and developing new programs and resources. Many of us have known Peter for a while, especially during his time working in the mayor's office, first in the Healthy Communities office, and then as Director of Partnerships and Intergovernmental Affairs. And I'm old enough to know Peter from way back when he was at Ocean State Action, which is served as executive director, and which was a coalition of community, labor, and environmental organizations. I love to, the work of Ocean State Action continue, even though that organization doesn't exist, it continues to work, and the work has been continued on by many other organizations. So Peter laid a strong foundation for it. He holds a master's degree in labor studies from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst and an undergraduate degree from Brown University. So Peter, let's turn it over to you to hear about what Providence Housing Authority is doing around energy efficiency. I think you're on mute still, Peter.
That's just one of those things from the Zoom bingo card of being on mute when you're supposed to be talking. Sorry about that. I really am very experienced with Zoom, so believe that. I'm happy to be here, and can I just ask, can everyone just see the slides, or do you also see the kind of stuff on the side and the?
We're seeing the stuff on the side too, the whole presentation.
Yeah, somehow in our test of this, it didn't.
That's fine. It's big. It's big enough. So.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about just some about specifically what we're doing in Providence, but also kind of some of the issues around public housing in particular when it comes to. Oh, there we go. When it comes to energy efficiency. The first thing is the public housing program, the way that it's set up. Maybe I should just kind of explain for people that don't know. Public housing is different from, say, Section 8 housing, in that the agencies that run it are quasi-governmental agencies that were funded directly by HUD. But we're not kind of like private businesses. There's also just a lot of separate regulations that public housing has that some other types of affordable housing do not have on the federal level. There's just different rules and regulations in terms of how it goes. And the federal government has kind of a legal interest in the actual properties themselves, which is very different from, say, multifamily housing, where the federal government just contracts with the owner. So in Providence, we have 2,606 units of public housing. We're the largest housing authority in the state. And we have 6 high-rises that serve elderly and disabled residents. And we have 4 family developments. So the first thing is just in terms of the public housing program. The amount of funding that we receive every year is set through congressional appropriation. It really varies a lot from year to year. We receive 3 different kind of major pots of funding. One is kind of rent contributions from tenants. Tenants pay typically 30% of their income towards rent. Then we receive a operating subsidy from HUD, and we receive a capital fund grant. But the operating subsidy, part of it is that we receive a certain amount of money based on what our energy costs are. So the problem there is, if you reduce your energy costs, some of what you save is going to be HUD giving you less money. So the kind of way the system is built doesn't really, in the main, incentivize energy efficiency. The other issue is just that a lot of public housing is very old. Our family developments, Chad Brown was first built starting in 1940. And most of our family units were built in the 40s and 50s, and the high rises were built mostly in the 1960s and early 70s. So there's a lot of, and that's fairly typical. The federal government really has not been supporting the construction of a lot of new public housing for decades. We only have several hundred units that are less than 30 years old, and those were scattered site units that were built in the early 1990s, but most everything is much older. So there's a few different things that we can do. One is, like anybody else who's eligible, that we pay into the ratepayer programs, and we've really focused a lot on trying to make use of those programs. I mentioned the capital fund program, which is basically grants that we get every year to address capital issues in the buildings. There's a capital fund financing program that I'll talk about, and then energy performance contracts is one of the ways to kind of address that lack of incentives. So we have all but 330 of our units, we pay for all the utilities. And so the tenant, for people that don't know in terms of affordable housing, typically that 30% payment, 30% of your income payment is to cover rent and utilities. So in some types of housing, people would get a utility allowance, a certain amount that they would be given as part of their housing subsidy towards utilities. But for most of our units, we pay the utilities, so they just pay, that full 30% as rent. So we're really paying in a lot to the energy efficiency funds as the landlord of all those units. We have a number of projects that we've done with support from RISE and those energy efficiency funds. We have, major boiler systems that are kind of centralized systems that serve hundreds of apartments, such as at Manton Heights, where we've replaced those systems in their entirety. And in some cases, we've had even $1 million projects where RISE has covered the entire cost of those projects. We have had projects where we've kind of shared the cost, but we've had some challenges around that because we are subject to a lot of federal rules in terms of how we procure work. We also are subject to prevailing wage laws. So sometimes if we're going to join in the cost of a project with RISE, all of a sudden the costs and the process for that project is going to be substantially different than if they kind of go about doing something on their own. So that's something that we've had to work through at times. Here's an example of one other project that's just been recently done. This is Kilmartin Plaza, which is on Benedict Street, right off of Cranston Street. Near Route 10 in Providence. It's a 106-unit, 6-story building that is elderly and disabled housing, mostly 1-bedroom and studio apartments, where we've put in a cogeneration system just in the past year, where the system basically shoots off waste, and that actually can be used and is harnessed to support hot water. So it's kind of one system that supports 2 different energy needs within the building. Even before we put that system in place, just due to other things that we had done over the last several years, we had already reduced our yearly water, electric, and gas costs over the last 4 years by 16%, which amounts to $28,000 a year that we were saving kind of prior to putting this system in place. But we're also hopeful and have projected substantial additional savings, in the future as well. The capital fund program, again, like the operating funding, it really bounces around quite a bit from year to year based on what Congress does in the budget. And we have to, make the best use of that spending amongst all of our 2,600 units of housing. We do try to plan as much as possible. In every 5 years, typically, we've been doing physical needs assessments of all the properties. HUD at one point was requiring that and isn't requiring it anymore, but we're still trying to plan what we do, in a long-term kind of way. But of course, there are things that happen, repairs that need to happen more immediately, and there is some ability to adjust with that. Typically, you have, with the capital fund, you have 2 years to obligate funds and 4 years to spend them. So at any given time, we have, up to 4 different years of grants that are open at the same time that we're spending and getting projects done across all the developments. We do have right now some of the bigger projects. We have a couple developments where we have boiler replacements, planned as part of our capital fund funding. This is the amount that we're getting in the current year. This is kind of a recent high water mark over the last several years as the sequestration caps were lifted in Congress. It may be counterintuitive to some people, but public housing has actually received more funding under the Trump administration last several year budgets than it did in the second term of the Obama administration, because at that point in time, people in Congress seemed to be more concerned about debt, and so there was sequestration and very strong spending caps put in place. So this amount of money, for us, we're very excited and happy about it, even if it's not really enough to address all the capital needs of our aging properties. But from 2011 through 2016, every single year we had under $4 million. And in the year 2000, in $2,000, we had 4.7 million. So we're actually, when you account for inflation, we're getting less now, even with this much higher increase, we're getting less than we were 20 years ago. And this kind of shows how we're spending it every year. We do have about 30% of it goes to operations and administration. And then we're spending some on paying off debt. So about half of the money actually can go towards new projects every year. The problem is generally public housing can't borrow money very much because of the fact that this funding source is Congress, and it's not consistent. It varies year to year. There's no kind of contract that's long-term. And so a bank is unlikely to give us money, but there is a program where you can take some of your future capital fund funds and borrow against those. And that's something that we do have in place. That's where that just over 1 million of our 1.2 of our 6 million is being spent this year to pay off prior bonds that we have in place. So we do have, at the current point in time, the projects we have being paid for that are not energy efficiency projects. They're real elevator modernization and sprinkler projects. But that is a source that we could use if you're looking at really a large scale, large cost project that you can't pay for with a single year grant. This is a potential option that's out there. The energy performance contract is a way to address that kind of incentive issue I talked about. It is another way that you can basically borrow money, and HUD wants PHAs to reduce their energy use because then it reduces their costs and it reduces what their subsidy is going to be. But it also kind of, through this program, allows you as the PHA to be incentivized and save in, share in those savings. So you do a lot of upfront work that costs a lot of money. You then have ways of measuring what the savings are, and HUD gives you a certain amount of money from that savings, some of which goes to pay down, a bond that paid for all that work to be done up front. There's a small amount that goes to pay a company that kind of manages the whole process. And then the housing authority itself ends up with some extra money beyond what it had to pay for those two other costs. So we actually were a very early adopter with this program and have EPC that started in 2006, which is a 20-year. We're only 6 years away from having fully ending that and paying off all the debt from it. At the time we did it, it was actually a 12-year program, but we got a waiver and approval to do a 20-year, which was very helpful in terms of having the return on investment for the energy efficiency improvements we made, because we could count savings for all of 20 years, to be able to pay off the costs. And we're working with a company called Amoresco through this, and there's 22 different big kind of initiatives that we did, which are each kind of measured separately, and we get payments separately for each of them based on the savings. Here's pictures just from redoing all of the gas piping at Chad Brown. So there's our, the pipes there, and then you can see the work that was done at that time to kind of, put all new piping in place. There was a lot of savings through water just from even just saying, okay, we're replacing toilets in 2,600 apartments and having them all be 1 gallon flush, savings per unit times, all the usage of that. Very basic kind of stuff, but that hadn't been done. and that we didn't have, with all the other capital needs that we had, it just wasn't a priority prior to having this kind of special source of funding for it. And then, of course, savings on sewer that were tied to some of the water reduction uses as well. And light fixture, that was at the time that we did this, was a lot of light fixture replacements. We've now gone through and done all, a lot of LED lighting as well. But at that time, we were kind of an early adopter with some of those changes. So this is just an example of what the financial kind of numbers look like for our EPC. The most recent year that was completed, we were able to calculate and show, about $1.25 million in energy savings, kind of going back to the baseline of where we were when things started. Just over $1 million of that went to pay the debt for the work, and then a fee to Amoresco, and we ended up with an extra $130,000 that we kind of made from this whole process. Over the last 10 years, the energy savings have accounted to just under $14 million, and PHA's kind of take of that, so to speak, has been just under $3 million. And so what are we looking at? What are we looking at for the future? Right now, HUD is really trying to encourage housing authorities to look at moving their housing outside of the public housing program and into project-based Section 8 or other ways to position public housing so that we can get more loans to really address all the long-term capital needs that Congress has not funded sufficiently over time. So that's something that we're looking at, and as in the course of doing those type of upgrades, we really would need to address, whatever other kind of energy efficiency improvements that we could make, because if we move to a different kind of platform of funding, whatever we can do to reduce energy costs will impact the bottom line of how the housing is operated. And we're looking at now, doing some new physical needs assessments as well to kind of get an understanding of what we need to do. And I guess we're going to save questions for the end, but I'm just sharing my contact information here as well if anybody has, wants to follow up at all.
Thank you, Peter. Very interesting info. Yes, we are going to save questions to the end. If you want to drop your question into the chat in the meantime as well, too, so that you don't forget it, please do that, and we'll get to those as we can. So let's keep moving along because we've got lots of great information to share. Next up is Christian Calderon, who is the Deputy Director at NeighborWorks Blackstone River Valley in the nonprofit developer in Northern Rhode Island. In his capacity there, he works with the NeighborWorks 450-unit residential rental portfolio and coordinates and implements their energy efficiency and water conservation strategies, among other things. Their portfolio currently has 2 active geothermal systems, one of which has recently been converted from an open to a closed loop, and I have no idea what that means, but I'm hoping that Christian will explain a little bit as we move forward. Christian.
Thank you, Brenda. And I want to thank Gross Smart for giving us this platform. I think Peter framed this for me really well, because I'd like to explain the difference in affordable housing than the housing authority. And I think it shows the shifting federal priorities a little bit, but in both, we're working within certain limitations that have to be understood. So, we serve low-income folks who average about 60% of AMI, area medium income. And so we're between 30 and sometimes we can go up to 80% AMI. Our rents are capped, and we don't have any real operating subsidy that comes with our units. What we do is we get the money up front in low-income housing tax credits, which is a really competitive funding stream. But we have no operating subsidies on rentals, and our rent is capped. So we really have that hard limitation. We can't adjust to market forces quickly. If there are sudden capital improvement needs, we're really hard pressed to come up with quick money, which is why careful reserve stewardship is so important. So And another thing is, Peter mentioned that the housing authorities pay most of their utilities for most of their tenants. We're the opposite. Our tenants pay their own utilities. So in that way, they are incentivized to be efficient. But in order to keep the affordability and the energy conservation connection, we're incentivized to build things, to build our buildings as efficiently as possible so that independent of resident behavior, we keep the utility costs down. And that's very important because I mentioned the AMI of our residents, they're low income. So if they have exorbitant heating costs or AC costs, that just means they're either going to be forced with not paying their utilities or not paying rent. So really, it's in our best interest to build as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to talk mostly about process. Oh, and I already forgot to hit my timer. So I'll start it now. I think I talked for about 3 minutes so far. I'm going to talk about process. And in our process, we really have the development and the operation elements. So where Peter says there's not a lot of new building in housing authority worlds, in our world there is. There's certainly not enough, as Housing Works Rhode Island, is pointed out in their latest fact book. I mean, there's still an overwhelming need in our state and in the country for affordable housing, but in the development and the LIHTC credits, this is what the money is for, to develop new buildings, new units. So we have LIHTC and we have multiple sources of financing. They're all competitive, but I want to just highlight that a lot of them have competing objectives. So where we will get points and credit for improving energy efficiency and for implementing, really great aspirational elements to our buildings. We also are competing against the cost per square foot. So most of the innovative technology still cost more to implement. So we could say, all right, we want geothermal and everything, but it's going to drive up the cost per square foot by 8%. And then all of a sudden we look less competitive than another project. So that's another limitation that we work within. So the result is we do the best we can and we build to the highest standards to ensure the affordability as we can within our budgets, but sometimes the innovations are lost in value engineering. But at the baseline, we build to Energy Star Tier 2 level. And this is a significantly higher level than regular building codes. It's about 1/3 higher in all the measurements and standards to the conventional codes. It typically requires a continuous thermal envelope, which includes blown-in insulation, a series of inspections that are done, and appliances and HVAC systems that meet efficiency standards. So our new construction and our renovations are to a pretty high standard. We usually do direct vent boilers that integrates hot water, so we don't have a lot of hot water tanks, which can be less efficient because they lose heat as the water remains in the tanks. And I want to note that both the Energy Star and the building codes change and evolve continuously, and they're always getting stronger. So the way we ensure our developments are built to the highest efficiency standards is really in pre-development. We work at the design stage, we consider and we vet all new innovations, technologies, building materials. We engage in cost-benefit analysis, energy modeling, and comparative testing. We work with architects and engineers on this. Energy Star also requires us to have certification by third-party engineers. So we have 1 or 2 companies we work with. They model the buildings based on the architectural drawings, and they tell us if we're going to be meeting those Energy Star Tier 2 levels. And then they stay with us in construction at critical stages to make sure that we're getting built what is spec'd. So when the framing goes up, when the insulation goes up, and then they come in and they do the final blower door testing to make sure that we're meeting all the standards of air infiltration and all of that. We've also brought in engineering companies to perform comparison modeling of different options in this design stage. And that way we can perform cost-benefit analysis. So our last 2 projects, we had this done and they compared HVAC systems and different applications of these systems so that we could get a good sense on first cost and operational costs and cost to our residents. And that really helped us to pinpoint, narrow down our options and choose the most efficient one. And, you know, I don't want to gloss over that because it's a really important stage. And we've done some self-help housing, which are small single-family home ownership units. And we actually had a company come in and look at a lot of different options, is sort of small as just adding more insulation to the attic, going from an R, whatever the code, R30 to, you know, R45 to see, well, how much would it cost to install these? And then what's the cost savings down the line? And this really helps us, I think, to make the smartest choices possible. So the result is, as Brenda mentioned, we have 2 geothermal systems. And, you know, I wanted to mention, you know, get back to the limitations of this funding. Most of the funding sources do not give you extra money to implement these innovative systems, but through very creative financing and hard work, you know, we managed to raise a little extra money to put into geothermal systems. One was an open loop system, which I'm happy to get into in the questions. And I would just say to everyone within earshot and everybody that you all know, never, ever install another open loop system. We've had to completely re-engineer the system and change it to a modified closed loop. Work and expense and heartache beyond belief. This is probably why I'm so gray over here, but I can get into that later. We have a small solar array on one of our units, which powers our exterior lights and also our common room. And, you know, we have some air sourced heat pumps, which is sort of the mini splits or a variable refrigerant flows. And hopefully someone else will talk about that system, because those systems and the heat pump, any heat pump works with electricity. So you can imagine connecting to a large solar array with electric, HVAC, and heat, and there you go. You can really have exceptionally low cost utilities. Now, that's aspirational. We haven't been able to do that to scale yet, but again, the heat pump technologies with the solar arrays are sort of where we want to be. Now, I'll just briefly, I have about 3 minutes left. I'll just talk about the way our operational process ensures optimal efficiency. You have to monitor indicators and do utility benchmarking. So we have WeGoWise. It's a little tougher in our world because we don't pay gas or electric for our residents, and it's harder to track tenant paid utilities. We try, but we at least have all common area utilities and water. And as Peter mentioned, there's a lot of savings to be had in water. You have to perform all your required service maintenance, follow all recommendations on service manuals. So we have third-party folks in working on our systems annually or biannually. We have maintenance, changing filters, because you know, you can buy a really great system, but if you don't maintain it, you're going to lose efficiency quickly. The efficiencies degrade often if you just have dirty filters. So it's really important to stay on top of that. Seems like small stuff, but when you have so much going on in so many properties, it's tough, and you have to build it into the system. And they also really help you understand your system well. All the performance and energy audits are important. And I'm going to wrap up now because I don't want to overstay my time. I'll just mention capital planning is important, and resident education is real critical. And in the questions and answers, we can discuss more of that. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Christian. And now I know which system to avoid. So thank you for that warning. And let's keep going so that we can get to some Q&A. Next up is Rilwan Faisatan, who's the Executive Director of the Community Action Partnership of Providence, or CAP, or if you're old enough, you remember ProCap, the original name of ProCap. He previously has served as the Deputy Director and Director of Program Operations for the organization. And he serves on numerous boards and commissions, and has worked in, specializes in cultural competency training, young adult partnership, strategic planning, and board development, all critical skills in his job, I'm sure. So Rilwan, turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. Thank Grow Smart for inviting us again to be a part of this really dynamic work and looking at intersectionality, in this case, between energy efficiency and long-term housing affordability. One of the things that being an executive director of a nonprofit anti-poverty agency, a Community Action Partnership of Providence, which I have the privilege of leading and directing our amazing staff and services for Providence and Providence County. We serve over 33,000 residents a year. Of those, between 8,000 and 10,000 come through our LIHEAP program, which ties into our weatherization. It's our feeder program. It's one of our larger programs. So depending on how warm or cold the heating season is, we have a variance between 8,000 and 10,000 people coming through for heating assistance. So on that reactionary program side, these are folks that have been at jeopardy for termination or have had their services terminated for non-payment or just extreme difficulty in navigating high utility bills. So that's the program we come in and we meet people in crisis. We're seeing them in need of restoration of services, but we move them through onto our weatherization side, where we're able to help them find very significant savings towards energy, which is the really exciting part of the work that we do, is moving people from crisis to self-sufficiency. And a part of doing that is, and I think it's recognized here through the summit, is that there are real opportunities to help people to find significant savings and to look at bettering the position that they're in. One of the things I should note is the economic downturn and the issues that we've had facing COVID are really unique times for us. But one of the things that we knew even a few years ago, even before COVID, was many of the folks that would be coming in to work with us were donors. Now, a couple of years later, they're coming in our doors needing heating assistance, needing support for weatherization. So we have a very big mix of individuals that are first-time home buyers looking to get into the market of buying their first homes. And then we've had people that have had homes for many years, but because of economic downturn, recessions, and the like, that now need support. And we find that intersection with utilities and with energy usage. So we have a really unique vantage point of working with people that really come to us at different places in time. So part of that distinction, again, is understanding where you're coming into or where you're entering your level of housing affordability. Some of the folks, again, as we mentioned, have been previous homeowners or have had homes for a really long time, but now have less income and are making those hard choices that everyone else is making that we know are very real for folks. So when you come in and not understanding what it means to not just purchase your home or be able to be in a place where you want to maintain a home, but not understanding how utilities and fuels impact that longevity of where you're going to be able to stay. When we meet with people on the tenant side or the first-time home buyer programs that we're doing, doing, we have those really honest conversations about what you may be able to afford in purchasing your home, but what does it mean to be able to stay in your home? It's the difference for many of the folks that we serve. A really quick analogy is we tell them you may be able to afford what the lenders provided to you. You're going to be able to purchase this home, but are you going to be what I call ramen noodle poor? Meaning that you've got your home, you want to be able to have your first 4th of July barbecue and party, but you can't afford to do it because your utility bills and all your cost of living and basic essentials are so high, you can't even enjoy the home that you're in. And how sad is that to have your slice of the American pie and your dream in a home, but you can't be able to really enjoy it because you're struggling to maintain both the rent payment and your utilities. So we have those really, really strong conversations. For those that are coming in, we make that a big part of their buying determination and how they're going to be able to support what they're going to do in their homes. I remember being a first-time home buyer myself, coming in thinking my home was turnkey ready to go in, and then many years later now being in this energy arena and doing weatherization work. I remember bringing one of our new toys. We have thermal scanners that we come home. So obviously I don't qualify for the program, but I just wanted to kind of see what my home looked like. And I remember coming through and using the thermal scanner, and it blew my mind to see how drafty it was, how much leaks were there, and how much energy I was wasting in my own home. And I'm running a weatherization program. It's kind of like the auto mechanic that, you see them driving the worst cars on the road because they do it every day, but don't take care of their own. So it's just a take-home message. I don't understand the product that Christian mentioned. I'm glad to avoid it. And I'm glad that we're putting in really, really good products that are allowing people to have really, really good returns, whether it be mini splits or doing some of the work that we do on installation and some of the other parts of our work. I'm going to just very quickly share my screen and not to go through a lot of slides, but just to give you a couple of key points as well in the work that we're doing. So for those of you that have learning styles that you need something, I apologize. I did not bring you a slide deck or a PowerPoint. I know part of your learning styles, you feel like you need that. You're not really at a training unless you have it. So at least you can have some documentation in writing to know that you were officially part of a summit and had some training today, or at least hopefully a good dialogue and discourse today. We operate and manage in the work that we do around energy efficiency and savings. I've listed 3, but there are really 5 key areas that we do to really talk about energy and how to help people make housing affordable when it comes to energy efficiency. The first one is our Weather Assistance Program, WAP for short. Weatherization is designed to help low-income families reduce their energy burden by making their homes more energy efficient. Services typically include installations of attics, walls, floors. We test all the boilers and furnaces, also the cooking appliances, meter the refrigerators. We'll look at hot water heaters and ensure that they're all running efficiency and not producing any harmful carbon monoxide or any other health hazards. That's the added bonus. But it's really a look at those appliances, those systems, to make sure that they're operational and that they're working at a high efficiency. So when we go in and replace a boiler or a furnace, they at a minimum have to be 95% efficiency. Can't be anything lower by our standards. So it's really making sure we're putting in really high quality replacements. We're swapping out refrigerators that are old. And I should mention, for those that qualify for our programs, LIHEAP as the feeder to weatherization, these are done at 100% cost to the program operation, so no cost to the program recipient or the residents. Another program that supports it, I mentioned briefly, is our Applied Management Program, or the AMP program. It's where residents receive a free energy audit to analyze their energy usage and reduce energy bills. That's the purpose of the program. Education is offered and residents may qualify for replacements of ineffective appliances at no cost. We're also going and put in all LED bulbs, smart strips, and more measures are also part of the work that we do to make sure that the home is operating, and we're really looking at making a real difference to the energy bill. The third part that's really been interesting is because of COVID, is we went to what's called virtual amps because we were not allowed to go in, social distancing. So we were able to really get innovative with our funders and partners to be able to do those remotely using Zoom and other platforms, allowing the residents to go through and count their bulbs, and then delivering all of those amp savings to the home on their doorstep without us having to go in and do the normal work. Now that we're allowed to go back into homes and starting to go to some normalcy, we're looking at those larger appliances, metering the refrigerators, and doing all that really effective work that we know has savings over the long term. So we have not been able to do the calculations on the cost savings because of the COVID and all the things happening this year. But on average, our residents, when we go in and do this work between weatherization and the AMP program, are going to save hundreds, if not thousands. We've literally seen savings to homes when we've gone in and looked at the utility bills, are now saving thousands of dollars on energy bills as a result of these measures being done. We give a quick shout out to our partners and funders that do that work. Listed are the Department of Energy, DHS state and federal, and one of GrowSmart's summit sponsors, and also one of our key partners, National Grid, in doing that work. The picture that you see to the right is one of our staff going in and doing blower door testing, high quality work, highly competent staff going in that are certified to go in and look at the building envelope of these homes. So they're not getting anything less than what anyone else would do on the commercial side, or if you and I were going out to get our homes done. We're doing all the diagnostics, imaging, like I said, thermal cameras going in, looking at heat loss and all the work and things that are happening there. I'd be remiss if I didn't go and show this last slide, which is our amazing team that go out. They're culturally competent. They know the community. They live in the community. They're trusted. They go in and do work. As an add-on, they're not just in there measuring the refrigerator. They're doing all the social service. So for our agency, if your refrigerator is empty, we don't have food, we're doing the referral process. If you see kids running around in diapers and don't have those, we're referring them to the services at our agency. One of the other things I wanted to mention that's really important is the education. That's kind of the last pillar of the work that we do, is talking about how to keep those incredible savings into the home, which is really, really important to the work that we do, is because it doesn't help to tighten up the home and the building envelope, and then you still have habits that prevent you from doing that incredible work, like having ACs running in the middle of the winter, or having windows open and all the heat just going out after we've tightened up the home and did all that really, really good work to make sure that there's savings. So folks like stats and statistics, one of the things I can tell you that we do that's really powerful is, on average, homes that we go in that are weatherized and get a boiler replacement, on average, that's about $15,000 of savings to a home. It could be as high as 25, depending on how expensive the heating system or furnace or boiler unit is. So that, in short, is kind of how we're doing the work that we're doing, engaging with about 33,000 families across our breadth of programs, but on weatherization, helping just many, many people throughout Providence and Providence County to be more energy efficient. With Providence having the oldest housing stock in the nation, really critical to that work. With there, Brenda, I'll pause and turn it back to you.
Thank you.
After I stop sharing my screen.
Very interesting. Thank you. And interesting perspectives from everyone. Last but not least for our speakers is Antonio Rodriguez, who is with One Neighborhood Builders, CDC located in Olneyville section, where he's the Assistant Director of Asset Management. Previous to that, he was at NeighborWorks Blackstone Valley, where Christian is, and started his career at NeighborWorks as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. So with that, also Antonio has a BA in political science from the University of Rhode Island and is a proud uncle of 4 amazing little ones. I'm sure that keep you busy and active as well too. So Antonio, let's turn it over to you.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to GrowSmart. Thank you to the panelists that talked before me and brought up a lot of critical points that not only make our work challenging, but on the other end of it makes it just as rewarding to know that
Oops, Antonio, I think,
yeah,
there you go.
term, and the things are critical. So as Brenda mentioned, I'm the Assistant Director of Asset Management at One Neighborhood Builders. We were founded in 1988 as the Olneyville Housing Corporation. And in 2016, we kind of came together with CWRI to form our One Neighborhood Builders. And we have affordable housing units. We have 6 wholly owned units that we own and we manage. that are sort of for the missing middle. So for people between 80 and 120% AMI, pretty close to like market rate. And we also have about 12 commercial properties that total over 25,000 square feet of commercial space. We have 11 LPs scattered throughout the Olneyville and Elmwood neighborhoods. And we're expanding. As I've only been there since September of 2019, and we've already added close to 50 to 60 units, and we're slated to add another 80 in the next year and a half or so. So we're continuing to grow and expand our reach. What you guys see on your screen now is our newest version of the mission. And our mission is to develop affordable housing and engage neighbors across Greater Providence to cultivate vibrant and safe communities. There's three primary goals to my presentation. The first one is to demonstrate One Neighborhood Builders' history with energy efficiency and affordable housing. The second is to highlight current projects that we're undertaking that are in development that highlight some of the energy efficiencies that we're utilizing and energy efficiency benchmarks that we're targeting to measure. And the last goal is to talk a little bit about our aspirations as an organization and how we're going to continue to develop affordable housing through a lens of energy efficiency, sustainability, and resiliency. As my colleagues have mentioned here on the panel, most of us have gone through the RISE/National Grid program to install, low flow toilets, aerators, and the such to help with energy efficiency and cost savings. But we also have, given the fact that our housing stock in Providence is so old, there's always the wave of renovations and resyndications. Every 15 to 20 years or so, you have to do a big capital improvement project. And for the past 6 years or so, One Neighborhood Builders has targeted a few of its LPs and made sure that, put in these Energy Star appliances, these energy efficient boilers and the exhaust fans for the bathrooms that help with airflow and indoor air quality. Because making a tight envelope for the house is important. But if you have poor air circulation or poor indoor air quality, it's almost just as bad as being outside. So it's really important. The project in development right now would be that I want to highlight that has energy efficiency as its target would be the Sheridan Small Homes project. The picture on the left is a pre-development rendering back in October 2019 of what we thought this right to the left, and you can see that one of them is almost completely built. The second one's just about there, and the first and second home are actually up for sale now for about $140,000. This project is really unique in the sense that these are small homes, so they're a variation of a tiny home. They're a little bit bigger, just under 800 square feet, and they're almost completely net zero and passive homes. We have about 11.5 inches of insulation surrounding the entire envelope of the house to help with both heat retainage and dissipation of cooling and heat during the seasons that it's necessary. So it's really exciting to have that project underway and have seen it come so far in only about a year. The last thing that, in terms of project that I want to talk about is sort of, like I said, our aspirational projects. This is one that's in development, but I'll jump into the aspirational ones in a second. In September of 2019, we signed into an agreement with a solar net metering project being developed in North Kingston. The picture on the left was back in December of 2019 when they were starting to develop the land. And back in August, we got an update. And as you guys can see on the right, all of the framing for the solar panels is being put in place. And we're hoping to start receiving the benefits of, signing into this agreement as early as the beginning of 2021. Our hope is that this agreement and this partnership with the solar array farm will help us offset the utility costs for all of our common area lighting, electrical heating costs, and like any common area electrical tied into the house meter. And as I said before, the last point I want to jump into, and it's a little bit hard to see because this is a architectural rendering, but I wanted to talk about and highlight projects in our pipeline. One of them being the Bedoyan row houses. And this is an interesting project because, as you can see, they're basically adjoined to each other, and that's because it's a series of 6 modular homes that have connected walls. So it's a new type of development that we're trying out to see how feasible it is, how sustainable it is to build, and long term how easy it is to manage. One of the things that we're planning to utilize with the sawtooth design is you can see it a little bit here. These are solar panels. So we're gonna have solar panels along the sawtooth roof, and that'll help offset the cost of the space itself. And it's gonna house about 8 to 9 2 and 3 bedroom units. So that is about my time. I don't wanna run too long. I wanna give definitely some time for questions, but if you guys want to get in touch with me directly, you can contact me via email or directly on my cell phone at the number here on the screen. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Antonio. Perfect timing, gentlemen. We are right at the 11 o'clock hour, and so it gives us a good 15 minutes for a Q&A. As I mentioned, you can either put a question in chat or just unmute yourself. I think the attendees can unmute yourself to ask a question of our panel. So let me give you an opportunity to do that now. Any questions? All right, so we're going to be shy. Let me start us off and ask folks to continue to pop in either through chat or to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. Just ending with some of just following up on some of the comments that Antonio made about solar farms and partnerships. Christian, I'm wondering if you've looked at that, or Peter, if PHAs have looked at it, particularly installing solar panels on lots of flat tops on some of the high rises and other flat top roofs on some of the high rises. So just wondering if you've looked at it. Christian, why don't you start off?
We have a project in pre-development that has a sawtooth roof, and we're going to install similar solar panels on the sun-facing surface. We have looked into farms a little bit. We've had some people give us presentations. We haven't quite felt comfortable moving forward with them yet. Some of the contractual elements were a little bit too far out for us. They make you kind of sign up and agree to this for multiple years. Mm-hmm. But it's a great way to, I think it's a great system. We just haven't found a good one for us yet.
It's actually a small project, so I didn't even talk about it in my presentation, but I'm going to show a picture from our appropriately named Sunset Village development, where we do have solar panels on the roof that were put up, I think around 10 years ago. You can see in the back little corner the development there. Sunset Village is actually only a 24 unit. It's an elderly and disabled development, but it's 24 apartments in a 2-story kind of square setup. So I don't actually know too much about the history of that project. It's not something that we've been focused on as much recently, but we have, and this was kind of a whole other thing, a whole other presentation in itself, so I didn't include it as well, but we are right now working with about 10 other housing authorities to engage in a contract for solar net metering. So that is something I could tell people about if they're interested, but basically it's off-site solar. So the solar net metering law, there's certain entities that are eligible to be off-takers, but we're working with developers who are building 3 solar projects at different areas around the state, and the energy bills of the housing authorities that are participating would be considered kind of off-takers who would get credits on their bills for the electricity that is that comes out of those solar projects, because the solar developer themselves do not have energy bills to offset with, and you can't kind of send new electricity back to the grid through the laws that we have in the state without having an off-taker for it, so to speak. So that's a project that we can do where we can be kind of part of sponsoring the establishment of new solar energy without actually putting it on our site or dealing with any of the issues that come with that. So it's we're in the process of putting that together now, and that's something also where there's a substantial financial benefit for the participating housing authorities as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll be eager to hear more about that. Had worked on the solar net metering bill years back, trying to get the nonprofit projects and others included in it. So I'm also curious to see what challenges that you may see in the state legislation or things that we need to amend. Not that I'm eager to jump back into that again, but it still would be important to know kind of problems that you may be seeing or limitations with the legislation.
Sure. Yeah, I could talk to you more about that and other people that are interested. I know there's 2 different components in the law, 2 different kind of ways to go into it, and I think one of them is open to certain, like nonprofit housing providers, for example, but that section of the program is capped right now.
Right.
So we're going through the other kind of means, which is open to municipalities and not necessarily open to all other affordable housing providers. So that is I mean, that's an issue in terms of the capacity, the opportunity for private affordable housing developers to be able to be a part of it as well.
So both a couple of you and Rowan in particular mentioned about kind of how COVID has changed your operations. Have you seen kind of any, so if anybody else wants to comment on that, obviously in terms of services, but also do you see that kind of impacting your energy efficiency work moving forward? Are you looking at the work differently because of the things that COVID is starting to teach us? And anyone who wants to jump in on that, please do.
I alluded to it. It's definitely been a difficult time in not having a vaccine, the social distancing, just comfortability of our workforce and crews going back into buildings. In our case, our auditors going in to do the assessment work. But I think it's about being innovative and pivoting. So the virtual AMP program that we talked about was really innovative in allowing us to use virtual technology to go in and interact with customers, residents, and those that needed to get education and work done. So I think we're going to continue to pivot. It'll be interesting as we go into the colder months. And it's always interesting depending on what the season is, if it's going to be a warmer winter or a colder winter, the needs. Because again, you don't want to be in the middle of winter when your boiler or furnace breaks down. So you're going to let people in if you have to out of necessity, but so much of our work is preemptive. So how do we get in there and help you to have better fuel and savings outcomes ahead of being in an emergency? But I think we're all pivoting and trying to figure out how it's going to work in this new reality we're in.
Brenda, I'll jump in that to piggyback on that. We have a capital improvement project scheduled to begin next spring. And the way COVID is impacting us is if we hit a certain level of interior improvements, we may have to actually relocate the existing residents, which would, vastly increase our cost and then decrease what we'd be able to do. So we're trying to figure out how to navigate that. That could have several impacts, and that's something we're dealing with now.
Interesting. Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off the piggyback there of mentioning the capital improvements, we're actually in the midst of a capital improvement project where we did relocate our residents in order to get the the interior scope accomplished in a very short week. So, you know, we're relocating our residents to a hotel in the area that we're, you know, partnering with to help us get through this, you know, difficult time, because you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. You know, you don't want the capital improvements to supersede the health and wellness of the residents. So you don't want to put anyone at any heightened risk by doing this. So week by week, we're going to be, you know, making adjustments, and it is definitely something that has become unforeseen cost burden. But it just felt like the best decision was to have the residents not in the units with, you know, 10 to 14 contractors that are in and out of there all day, all week. And it also allowed us to increase our work day. So, you know, we're going from 6 a.m. until about 5, just to be able to get everything done in a 4.5 day period. So it's very challenging, and it's been, like I said, a lot of in real-time adjustments and troubleshooting. One of the things being like the fact that, you know, you have to disinfect before and after you get into the unit. That in and of itself is a big burden administratively and logistically for not only our residents, but for the contractors, our maintenance staff, property management. So it's a lot of moving parts.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in the chat. CJ, if I'm missing something, please let me know. But CJ, our colleague from GrowSmart. But I do want to ask again a general question. Rwanda, off a comment that you made about kind of the seasons dictate kind of somewhat of the need, and whether or not we have cold winters or hot summers. We certainly had a hot summer this summer, and Housing Works, through our partnership with the Alliance for Healthy Homes Project, worked with Blue Cross, and I see Carolyn on the line, and National Grid and Providence Housing Authority to provide some air conditioners into units and development. So just curious as to, you know, what you're seeing in terms of kind of the trends. Are you seeing kind of more as we get as weather, and we seem to be getting hotter, if you start to see shifts in need around ACs, and in general, just kind of comments about air quality. We know as more people are staying home and socially distancing, that air quality in the home becomes even more critical as well. So anyway, that's a long, not really a question, but just wondering what people are observing and seeing about the changing nature of climate change.
It was very real. COVID put us on our heels trying to figure that out. But part of it's a supply and demand issue. So again, with more people being home in the summer, having to socially distance and isolate, we had dramatic shortages on appliances, both air conditioners, refrigerators, and other staples that we've never experienced before. So again, to tell people to be home and not be able to have as many cooling stations or have the ability to bring people together to congregate in large spaces. I definitely think it's part of our after action response that we're gonna have to look at, both with the utilities, but with our providers, and with government and elected officials on how we better prepare for the next event if there should be one. I don't think we've quite grasped on how to deal with it in action after reports, and I think recovery phase, which we're still not in, are gonna be really, really key. So again, if it's a really, really cold winter, the demand's going to be higher for services and for people to be out. So I think we've got some work to do before it officially gets cold. As you see me in my first sweater of the season as we transition. So I know that doesn't fully answer it, but we're really trying to understand what that's going to mean. And Rhode Island's traditionally considered a cold weather state. So we've just integrated in our programs over the last couple of years, ACs as part of the package of offerings. And I think we're going to need to really examine how we expand that and ratchet up with distribution being affected the way it was this year.
Interesting. Peter, any comments?
One thing is I didn't mention, because of the, you know, us paying the utilities, the only thing that we do, you know, charge tenants in terms of air conditioner is a $25 a month fee. That's for 4 months for the summer season, you know, from June through September. So we have a whole process where we have to have everybody who's going to install an air conditioner register that with us. In the high-rise buildings, which in some cases go up to 14, 15 stories, we require people to have our maintenance put them in, and that was definitely complicated this year with COVID. We did it, but there was a whole kind of screening process we did with tenants before we sent people in to the units. I think as was being discussed before, we've certainly limited some of the work that we're doing in residence apartments more generally to more emergency kind of matters and have this whole screening process as part of it. We do have tenants who have the ability to have the air conditioner installed year round, say if there's a reasonable accommodation and a health issue that requires it as well. And I think I haven't looked at the numbers to see how that's kind of changed over time, but I wouldn't be surprised if that has potentially grown over time in terms of the number of tenants that need that. I think that's what, oh, the one other thing I wanted to mention, now I'm trying to remember, was one challenge we have sometimes is we have in family units, like a 2-story apartment in some cases, where there may only be one window in a particular bedroom, and we have a safety requirement basically where we can't have an air conditioner in that bedroom because we have to have a means of egress out of the bedroom. And that's a frustration, obviously, for tenants in those type of situations if they can't, for safety reasons on our end, have an air conditioner in the bedroom in their apartment. But that has to do with just the way that the units were designed and the other kind of conflicting kind of safety requirement that we have to deal with.
Interesting. Christian, last comment, and then I think we're going to close up.
Okay. That question, Brenda, it's really about climate change resiliency. And we're seeing the need in Rhode Island's temperate cold weather zone for air conditioning as well. As you said, it's a kind of a hot, brutal summer, especially if you're in a small apartment. Mm-hmm. And we're just seeing that you need to put AC in now, which again pushes you towards more of the heat pump technologies. That is a benefit of geothermal or the mini splits because they can deliver both. Mm. So, Antonio mentioned resiliency as part of his presentation, and we're seeing not only energy efficiency, but resiliency as something that's really become prominent in the development and pre-development stage. So, and it's not going to get any better. We're going to have to do resiliency for, flooding events, for heat events and all that stuff. So that's my
I think these are all really interesting and challenging questions, and particularly when we're trying to do it with a very old housing stock as well too. It obviously adds greatly to the cost to try to rehab these units to meet all of these changing demands that our climate is giving us. So, all right, well, thank you. Lots of food for thought, gentlemen, on all of this. I noticed on Zoom, everybody has a beard. Is that a sign of a cold winter? You've already grown your beards, or hopefully not, but who knows, right, what the weather has in store for us. Thank you all again. I don't see any questions, but please feel free to send any questions to us or to any of the panelists. As our colleagues at Grow Smart have mentioned, the presentations and the information will be on the website. Don't forget to join us this Friday for the final event of the Grow Smart seminar. Some interesting speakers that I know we'll all enjoy. And I'll do a plug for our event on October 16th. We'll be releasing our annual 2020 fact book. We'll have a morning panel at 10 o'clock and then the fact book at 11:15. Our guest speaker will be Diane Yantel, who's executive director at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And if you haven't heard Diane speak, she's fabulous. So please join us. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks to all of our participants and attendees for being with us today, and I appreciate it. Stay well and stay healthy.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Goodbye.